Hi everybody, I'm Ronnie Jackson, Congressman for the Texas 13th Congressional District, your district, and I would like to welcome you all to Canadian Texas, a major hub for Texas agriculture. Though I can't be with you today, I want to take a few minutes to thank you for the important work you do every day to feed our nation and to highlight the work I've done to advocate for the ag community here in Congress. I want to start by thanking Texas A&M Agrilife for putting on this conference. As the largest comprehensive agricultural program in the country, your work is critical to advancing the Texas ag industry, and I appreciate all the work you do. This year's conference is all about restoring the roots, something that is particularly important as we recover from the disastrous weather events, the market turmoil, and the disruptions caused by COVID-19. Thankfully, the American ag industry has a strong history of resilience and will emerge from these setbacks stronger than ever before. This recovery is critical as the beef industry is one of the greatest contributors of our economy. I know this firsthand as the Panhandle and Plains regions of my district are home to the highest density of cattle in the entire country, which helps to make my district the #1 ag district in the state of Texas. I could not be more proud to represent this area, and I will always fight for your best interest in Washington, D.C. That is why I've hit the ground running on ag initiatives since taking office this year. Early on, I worked to establish the Texas Agricultural Task Force to ensure that Texas ag priorities are heard by the House Agricultural Committee as we proceed through the 117th Congress. In my leadership role on this task force, I've had the privilege of speaking with stakeholders across the state, and I will continue to be hands-on in every key agricultural issue facing our Texas farmers and ranchers. Based on my conversations so far, I've developed several initiatives to advocate for our ag industry. For instance, I introduced the Bipartisan Restore Act last month with my Democrat colleague, Henry Cuellar. This legislation would help the ag community recover from natural disasters, including the recent storms we had in Texas. So often, what we see on TV about Congress is a deep partisan divide. And yes, that is a sad part of politics. But I want you to know I will always seek common ground for the betterment of our country and the agriculture community in particular. Additionally, last week, I sent a letter to Secretary Vilsack regarding the Department of Agriculture's COVID restrictions on our FSA facilities. These facilities are currently operating at a DC-mandated limited capacity, which hurts the ability of our farmers and ranchers to receive the aid they deserve. This letter urged Secretary Vilsack to reopen these facilities at full capacity so we can make sure farmers and ranchers have the access they need and the necessary resources during these turbulent times. While this has been a good start, my work will not end there. I have compiled several other ag priorities which I would like to address this Congress, including fixing our supply chain issues, preserving and strengthening the farm safety net, creating protections against overregulation, and protecting family farmers from the Democrats' radical death tax. I look forward to working with my colleagues on these issues and to proving myself as a trusted friend and vocal ally for the Texas ag community. I understand you're about to hear from Sarah Huckabee Sanders, my friend, former colleague from our days in the Trump administration, and soon to be the governor of the great state of Arkansas. She is a fighter, and I know she cares about the beef industry as much as I do. I can confidently tell you that you are lucky to have her in your corner. Thank you for inviting me to participate in the conference. I hope to visit you all in person soon. Thank you.
Well, the 2021 Hemphill County Beef Cattle Conference our theme this year is about restoring the roots of our future, or for our future, based on our heritage from the past, and then also based on the experiences that we have each and every day, carrying those things forward to invest in the future generations. Ranchers and beef cattle producers have to go through lots of struggles. In my lifetime, I've seen droughts. I'm a county extension agent today because of a drought that wiped out my own cow herd. But thanks to my family heritage and the roots of people that care for me and love me, my life didn't end with that loss. My life was restored. And the restoration of those moments in life come from healthy roots. And so one of the things that I hope that we accomplish in this Beef Cattle Conference is a reflection of how important our roots are to our heritage going forward, not just for the generations ahead of us, but for our own destiny and completion of our own work even today. Because of the perseverance and the fact that the roots of our heritage are deep and healthy and strong, we survive and we prosper for today and for our future. And that's what this event's all about.
At this time, making their way down the aisle, it is my pleasure to introduce the keynote speaker today, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. She served... Thank you, and thank you for being with us today. Ms. Sanders served as White House Press Secretary for President Donald J. Trump from 2017 to 2019. A trusted confidant of the President, Sarah advised him on everything from press and communication strategy to personnel and policy. For 2.5 years, Sarah was at the President's side battling with the media, working with lawmakers and CEOs, and staffing the President on every foreign trip, including dozens of meetings with foreign leaders. Sarah's only the third woman and the very first mother to ever hold the job of White House Press Secretary. Upon her departure from the administration, President Trump described Sarah as irreplaceable, a warrior, and a very special person with extraordinary talents who has done an incredible job. An early supporter of President Trump, Sarah joined the Trump campaign as a senior advisor in February 2016 during the Republican primary and continued in that role through the president's defeat of Hillary Clinton, one of the greatest and most unexpected victories in American history. Sarah has previously worked in leadership roles with U.S. senators, governors, and presidential campaigns. In Arkansas, Sarah was senior advisor to Senator Tom Cotton in 2014 when he defeated incumbent Democrat Senator Mark Pryor, and was campaign manager for Senator John Boozman in 2010 when he defeated incumbent Senator Blanche Lincoln. And in 2007 and 2008, Sarah helped lead her father, former Governor Mike Huckabee, to victory in the Iowa caucuses and 7 other states as his national political director. Sarah has been named one of Time magazine's 40 Under 40 and is recognized as one of the best political operatives of her generation. Sarah has also advised major Fortune 500 companies and nonprofits, including serving as campaign manager of the One Campaign, and that is a global nonprofit founded by U2's Bono to take action to end extreme poverty and preventable disease, particularly in Africa. She is married to her husband, Brian. They have 3 children, Scarlett, Huck, and George, and live in Little Rock, Arkansas. Help me welcome Ms. Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Thank you.
I should have worn boots. I'd have been a little taller there. Could have made it. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be with you. Normally, when I step up to a podium, I don't get applause. I like this a whole lot better. So I'm not used to coming behind and having friendly faces when I step up to speak. So forgive me if it takes a minute for me to get settled in. I do a lot better if you're yelling at me instead of clapping for me. So this is a new thing, but I like it a whole lot better. It's such an honor to be here. Andy, thank you so much for inviting me and allowing me to be part of this special occasion. It's nice to have a warm introduction. So many times you go to different events. One time I was traveling with my dad, and the guy got up to introduce him and said, "I've been told he needs no introduction." And that's a good thing because I've never heard of this guy. So I appreciate Bob. Thank you for the kind words and such a much warmer introduction than sometimes we get as the political world likes to offer. Like I said, it's an honor to be here. One of the things that Bob mentioned in my introduction, certainly I think a lot of people know me in very different capacities. Some people, as I travel around my home state of Arkansas and even all over the country, know me as Mike Huckabee's daughter. And frankly, that's something I'm very proud of. I don't think there is a better human in the world, and so when people make that association for me, I'm always very excited and proud and happy to claim that title. One of the other things people know about me is that I'm Donald Trump's former White House press secretary, and that is also something I'm very proud of. Whether people liked Donald Trump or not, he delivered on exactly what he said he was going to do, and I was proud to be part of that and play a small role during my 2.5 years at the White House. But one of the titles, and probably the thing I'm most proud for people to know about me, and Bob touched on it briefly when he said I was only the third woman to ever be the White House press secretary, but the very first mom. I have 3 incredible children, Scarlett, who will be 9 in 2 weeks, going on 25, Huck, who is 7, and George, who's 5. So I want you to take a minute and let that sink in. My kids are 8, 7, and 5. When I started at the White House, my youngest was 1.5. So we do chaos really well at my house. In fact, I think I'm one of the only people that went to the White House to get a break. I was so surprised to find out that I was the very first mom to ever have that job. Because for me, people always ask, how did you prepare to be White House press secretary? I said, it's real simple. I'm a parent to preschool-age children. I needed an enormous amount of patience. Some of you are going to take a minute to let that sink in. I needed a lot of patience. I had to say no a lot, and I had to answer the same question over and over and over again. So being a parent was the perfect prep work for going into that job. But it was also a very difficult part of being a parent because it's a 24/7 all-consuming job. And so I was gone a lot. I had to work all the time. Even when I was home, I was often on the phone or working and not always present, and that made it really difficult for my family. Growing up in a political family, I learned very early on what it means to serve and why it's important. Having a dad who was governor for nearly 11 years in my home state of Arkansas, it was very important for my parents, for all of us. I have 2 older brothers. Well, they like to take credit for my toughness. I was the youngest and the only girl. When I was 3, my brothers super glued my hands together. So I think they probably get a little bit of credit for it. But growing up in that political family, my parents wanted my brothers and I to understand why they were making the sacrifice to serve. They wanted us to understand why our family was engaging in the political process, why it was important to stand up and fight for the values that were important for our family. And they felt like the best way for us to understand that was to take us with them along the way. I didn't understand until I was in high school that it wasn't normal to spend your summers going to Arkansas festivals instead of camp in the pool. I thought every kid went around and passed out brochures and asked them to vote for their parents. But it was such an incredible experience. It was one of the ways that not only did I fall in love with my state, but I also figured out who I was, why it was important to be proud of that, and why it was important to stand up for myself and to have confidence and belief in knowing that God had created me for a unique and special purpose, and I should never be ashamed of it. It was important for me to extend that same important lesson to my kids. And so during my time at the White House, I tried a lot to take my kids with me. I learned very quickly after one experience, taking all 3 kids to any White House event was a huge mistake if I wanted to keep my job. My youngest was 1.5 when I started at the White House. So taking him to an event where you needed to be on good behavior was pretty much a non-starter. So I put my kids on a rotation. I started taking them one at a time to special events. And on one particular occasion, it was my son Huck's turn to go with me. He was about 4 at the time, and you name a kid Huck, you sort of set a certain expectation for him in life. And he was living up to it every minute of every day. So Huck's a bit of a rascal, but it was his turn to go. And this was a slightly different event. This was called Bring Your Kid to Work Day at the White House. And I debated whether or not I should take Huck with me. This wasn't going to be a 1 or 2 hour event. This was an all-day commitment. And my husband Brian and I debated whether or not Huck could make it through an entire day at the White House without getting me fired. We decided at the end of the day that this opportunity was too special for him not to get to do it. So despite the fact that all the other kids were going to be 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, we decided to take Huck. Brian would be on standby, and if at any point I called during the day, he'd pick up and come grab Huck and save me from losing my job. Off we went, and Huck was on perfect behavior. He had on his little tie and his blazer, and I took about 10,000 pictures before 9 o'clock in the morning. Little did I know that the morning was the least memorable part of our day. You see, one of the biggest things that they do on Bring Your Kid to Work Day is they gather all the kids in the Rose Garden. And the president comes out and greets the kids, thanks them for coming to the White House, and takes pictures with them. We decided to do something a little bit different that year, and we actually invited the press to participate and bring their kids to have pictures with the president. So as I go into the Oval Office and I'm briefing the president, I'm reminding him half of the kids out there, their parents are reporters. You might watch what you say. That was pretty much the response he gave me too. As the president was ignoring my advice, we noticed that the bushes in the Rose Garden start to violently shake. I think, well, that's odd. About the time I realize what's happening, this little blonde head pops up out of the bushes and runs full speed directly to the window of the Oval Office. That little boy pushes his face completely up against the glass. I don't know if you've seen a 4-year-old's face smashed up against glass before, but it is a sight to behold. The president jumps back, oh my gosh, clearly appalled by the situation unfolding. There's a little boy looking into the Oval Office. I said, yes, sir, that's my son, Huck. He just shakes his head and goes, well, Sarah, at least he's handsome. Huck didn't want that to be the only mark he left on the White House that day. So as the president walks out of the Oval Office onto that famous, beautiful colonnade where thousands of pictures have been taken of presidents current and past, here comes that same little boy, this time running directly at the President of the United States. The president, being gracious, crouches down like he's going to pick Huck up. And just before, I'm pretty sure, Secret Service intervened and Huck got to the president, he sidesteps him, ignoring him completely in front of the entire crowd, and runs and jumps into my arms just behind the president. The president turns around and looks at me and goes, are you kidding me? This kid again? And I was about to get on to Huck, and I was about to discipline him, and then I realized, you know what? I'm actually really proud of Huck, because for every other kid that is here, the only person that matters, the only person they care about at all is the president. But for my 4-year-old son, the only person he cared about was his mom, and that's pretty awesome. One of the things that I think is so important in this country is that we continue to clear that path for our kids. We continue to clear a path so that they can run unafraid and in total reckless freedom towards what they want. But in America, if you look at what's happening in places like Washington, D.C., you might think that we're losing that. I know I am terrified of watching what is taking place among the radical left in Washington. I'm terrified of the fact that we have to stand up and fight every single day for the values that are supposed to be the ones our country was founded on. That's not what America's all about. The reason that America is the greatest country the world has ever known is because we're the freest country the world has ever known. That is who we are at our core. That is what we are rooted in as a society, is freedom. One of the things that scares me is the fact that there are people who want to fundamentally change who we are as a country. They want to take away what makes America great. One of the things that my dad used to always say is that a country cannot truly be free if they cannot feed themselves, fuel themselves, and fight for themselves. We have people in this country who want to eliminate our ability to do all three of those things. That is unbelievable to me, and we cannot allow it to happen. Our farmers and our ranchers play a huge part in that. They are critical. Let that sink in. Absolutely critical to America remaining free. Because if we cannot feed ourselves, we cannot be a free society. If we become dependent on anyone else, then we lose the greatness of this country. I join in with thousands, millions of others who are grateful for the work that our farmers and ranchers do to allow us to be free in this country. Unfortunately, I think that the radical left is coming after our farmers, coming after our ranchers, and targeting them in the name of environmental policy, things like the Green New Deal. We cannot sit back and allow that to happen. We must stand up. We must remember who we are at our core and who we are at our roots. Because together we can feed ourselves, we can fuel ourselves, and we always must be able to fight for ourselves, because that is what will keep us free. One of the greatest experiences I had over the course of my 2.5 years at the White House was getting to travel with the president. And the reason I loved it, not just because of the opportunities and the places we got to go, but I went on every single foreign trip that the president took. But it was such a great reminder of what America really is and what a beacon of light we are for the rest of the world. But it was also so incredible to get to interact with so many different people. That was the thing I loved the most, was the opportunity to meet and interact with what I consider the very best of this country. You see, every trip the president takes, the people who help coordinate and handle every movement he makes are the men and women of our armed forces. There is no greater representation of who we are and what makes us great than the men and women who are willing to put it all on the line, sometimes making the ultimate sacrifice so that we get to live free in this country and come to gatherings and things like this. On one particular trip that I took with the president, December 25th of 2018, that was Christmas night, I went on a trip that I will never, ever forget, and probably one of the more impactful moments of my life. I just tucked my kids in and cleaned up all of the chaos of Christmas at my house when I had to leave and tell my own family on Christmas night that I was leaving but couldn't tell them where I was going. The reason I couldn't tell them where I was going is because I was going on a secret trip to Iraq with the president. And the place that we would be traveling to was so dangerous, they didn't want anyone in the world to know that the president would be on the ground even for a few hours. Yet we have men and women who live there every day fighting for our freedom, protecting our freedom, preserving our freedom. We boarded Air Force One in complete and total darkness. The shades on the plane pulled down, not a single light on the plane or the runway. Our phones turned in. We were going completely and totally off the grid, which is a pretty big undertaking for the president, who has every movement he makes tracked by thousands of people. This had taken a lot of planning to go into this. Only a handful of the people on the plane and on the ground knew that the president was making this trip. We touched down in the war-torn part of western Iraq, late in the evening, again in total and complete darkness. Air Force One is usually lit up like a Major League Baseball stadium for a night game. So it was a very different feeling to see it land in complete and total darkness in a war zone. The only glimmer of light was coming from about a mile from where we landed, where hundreds of troops had packed into a small dining hall. They thought they were going to be having dinner with senior military leadership from the region. They had absolutely no idea that the president was coming. And when he walked into the room, it erupted. The crowd went absolutely crazy. And not just because it was Donald Trump, while I'm certain they were excited to see him, it was because the commander-in-chief cared enough to come into one of the most dangerous parts in the world on Christmas night and thank them for the service and the sacrifice that they were making. As the president started to make his way around that room, one of the young soldiers yelled from the back, "Mr. President, I re-enlisted in the military because of you." And the president said, "And son, I'm here because of you." It was an incredible exchange between two people serving in completely and totally different capacities, but willing to put everything on the line for the freedom of this country. As the president made his way around the room, that young soldier came up to me. He said, "Sarah, He said, "You have a tough job." I thought, "Are you kidding? I take questions." I was like, "You take bombs and bullets." I was like, "What I do is nothing." We thanked each other for our service. And in a moment that I will cherish for the rest of my life, he reached up and he pulled the Brave Rifles patch that he wore on his shoulder, and he placed it into my hand. He said, "Sarah, we are in this together." That is who we are as America. That is what represents the greatness of this country. That is what we have to fight for. No man or woman who ever serves in our armed forces should ever do so in vain. Every person like that young soldier, everyone that comes after him and everyone that came before him should know that the people of this country believe in that same freedom, and we're willing to do our part in the fight for it. Not every person is called to the battlefields of Iraq. Not every person is called to run for office. Not every person is called to serve in a public capacity, but we all have a part to play in the fight for freedom, in the soul of this country. I'm thankful for the work that you do because I think it is a huge contribution to the soul of this country, to the heart of who we are. We still believe in things in America. And it is our job to make sure that our kids grow up in an America that still allows them to run with complete and total freedom towards what they want. As a parent, there is no greater responsibility that I hold to make sure my kids grow up and love and appreciate this country the same way that I do. I'm grateful I had parents who passed that on to me. And now it's our job to make sure that we preserve, we protect, and we pass that love for freedom on to our kids. I'm thankful for your willingness to be here. I'm thankful for the work that you do and the contribution that you make to keep America free. Let's make sure we continue to do that together. Let's fight together, and let's focus on what makes America so special. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here. God bless you. God bless the United States, and thank you again for the hard work that you do. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, and we've got time for some questions. So please fire away. We've got a question right here. Let's see.
I was promised that these questions would be slightly different than the Jim Acosta version I'm used to. So if they're not, I'm passing them on to Andy.
Well, we're all a bit chapped about the last election. And I wanted to ask you, do you agree that this election was rigged, that we lost, that it was stolen from us? And what do we need to do as a country to prevent that from happening again?
Sure. Look, I think certainly there are plenty of examples of fraud and abuse within this last election. The real answer is I don't think we'll ever know how far and how wide it went. What I do know is that our focus can't be on what happened, but what we can do to make sure it never happens again. Our goal can't be to continually look back, but it has to be on looking forward and how we come together as a country, how we make sure that we have confidence and integrity in our election process. I know there are a number of groups around the country that are working to make sure that happens. One of the things that I think is so important is that we look for people in our state and local leadership. At no time have we learned more so than in the last year how important the state and local leadership are in all of our communities. I think for a long time we got so focused on what was happening in Washington, we forgot about all of the leaders starting from city council, city boards, school boards, mayors, governors, attorney generals, secretary of states. If nothing has taught us anything over the course of the last year, it is what an impact state and local leaders can have on our daily lives. And we have to get engaged in that process. We have to make sure we're doing our part, that people that are like-minded are serving in those roles. I think that's where our focus needs to be, is where we go from here and making sure that we have integrity in our election process moving forward.
More questions?
I know this group has probably never been this quiet in their lives. There's too many cowboys in this room to be this quiet.
I don't know that I necessarily have a question. I just want to say that I've been inspired by you for many years now, and watching a woman and a mother do the things that you do, it gets me emotional right now. You're inspiring, and you're a good role model for our girls to be able to look up to, and I really, really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. She wouldn't say that if my kids were here, because they could tear this place apart really quick.
On behalf of the Texas Panhandle, the Texas A&M, the Agri-Extension Service, Annie Holloway, his hard work, putting all this together, we want to say thank you for coming and being here and sharing with us. My direct question to you is I get tons of mail about Hillary Clinton and the dossier and that jargon lie that they made up about Donald Trump. And my first question would be, what are the chances of her ever being convicted or taken to a courthouse about what she did? And number two question is, with Joe Biden, the man in Washington running our country now, and
Well, it's
his
not
son,
Joe Biden.
Okay. He's a puppet. Okay, yeah. What are the chances of Joe Biden and his son, the light really coming out on their shenanigans? I'll shut up.
That's a lot to unpack, so I'm going to do the best I can. Unfortunately, with the Biden-Harris administration in charge of the Department of Justice, I don't have a lot of hope that there will be movement on anything against Hillary Clinton in the coming years, but you never know. I always like to say in politics, never plan for much, because every time you do, it's going to be a very different scenario than you ever expected. And so we'll have to wait and see if anything comes from that. But one thing I can tell you is, after living through the nightmare of the Russia hoax and the Russia investigation for over 2 years, is that I think that entire process has taught us what we're up against and how prepared we have to be. You know, in my family, we always say, if you don't like the sight of your own blood, don't get involved in politics. And I think we learned that lesson time and time and time again. But we also learned how important it was to stand up for ourselves, not to back down, not to let the left try to change us or intimidate us. I think so many times right now, the things going on in this country, there is so much pressure not to be who we are, and not to believe in the certain things that we do, to be ashamed of our faith, be ashamed of our values. And frankly, I've never been more emboldened than I am now, because the more that they try to push our backs against the wall, I think the more we have to lean in, and we have to continue to fight for what matters in this country. And I think that process and this president certainly showed us that and helped pave the way and gave us a foundation to do it. So.
Have you thought about a Sanders and Huckabee ticket in 24?
No, right now I'm just trying to survive a race that I'm in back home in Arkansas, and we'll see what happens from there. I got to win that first. Uh-oh. The man in charge is asking a question. This will be where my career goes to pot right here.
So, Sarah, we know you're a Fox News contributor, and on Friday, Fox News spent half their morning reporting that Vice President Harris and the Green New Deal, as part of their mission, is to basically destroy meat and beef consumption over the next period of a few decades. So of all of these people that are beef cattle producers, and it is our way of life, it is our roots, it's part of America's roots, it started with the Pilgrims. What is your advice to us as producers, as beef cattle producers, to make sure that doesn't happen?
Yeah. Well, I think for one, keep doing what you're doing. Don't back down. Keep producing, because there are a lot of people out there who support you and support this industry. But the other part of that is pay attention to who you're voting for. We have to engage in the election process. We have to make sure we are electing good people. In 2022, I think Republicans have a very good chance to take back the House. From the redistricting alone, I think we'll pick up anywhere from 4 to 6 seats, all which go into the Republican favor. Those are people who are not supporting the Green New Deal, who are not supporting policies like that. It is so important. I think we, again, have a great chance to build that firewall in Washington. In 2022, we also have 38 governor's races across the country. 38 governor's races. Our governors will be the firewall and our last line of defense, fighting back against the craziness coming from Washington. And we have to make sure we have people not only that are tough enough to fight back against it, but also understand how to lead our state and our country forward. I think there are a number of good people in those places, and I think we need people like the ones in this room to engage at every level in every way that they're able to. Yes, sir.
They are engaged, but when you're voting on a machine that's foreign owned, how are you going to get around it?
Well, again, I think that goes back to making sure we have good people in our state and local offices as well, making sure we have integrity, making sure we have people that are paying attention and watching what's taking place in our elections. A lot of places we don't have that, and I think we have to make sure we're putting those people in place. I'll let you say that, not me right now. But yeah, I think some of the squishy people we could probably do without.
On a lighter note, of all the 2.5 years...
You don't seem like you usually do lighter note.
Of all the 2.5 years that you served, what is the most memorable question that you had, other than the fact that they repeat the same question over and over and over?
That's actually a really hard question. The most memorable question I had. It actually, oddly enough, is probably one that came from a young kid. It was a pretty crowded briefing. They don't have those anymore, but it's a pretty small room. There are about 150 reporters packed into it. And a young boy was about 11 years old. There were several reporters around him. He was standing in the back of the room, and they were trying to get my attention to call on him, and I do, and I think that he's going to ask me, a lighthearted question. What's your favorite part of the job? What do your kids like to do? And he hit me with a really, really hard question, and I got pretty emotional answering. He wanted to know what we were doing to help protect kids in schools. And it really grabbed a hold of me as a parent. There's nothing harder than dropping your kids off and not knowing if they're safe, not knowing if you're doing everything that you can to make sure that they're protected. And so that was something that really struck me and stuck with me, but also reminded me of why we're involved in service, is because our goal is to make sure that we're doing everything we can, not just to protect those kids, but to provide a way that they get to determine the path that they take. To me, that's what part of the goodness of America is that no matter where you start, no matter what kind of life you have as a kid, you get to grow up and decide the path that you take. And so that was such a stark reminder to, I think, bring the whole room back to why we got involved in the process in the first place. So there were a lot of memorable moments in that room, but that's definitely probably one of the biggest takeaways that I had. And it came from an 11-year-old, not one of the reporters. Let that sink in too. Yes, sir.
I hope I don't blow the mic up because my voice carries pretty good. But Sarah, in your position where you're running for a political office, and we look out here across all of these people, this man right here is an educator. We've got educators all over. We've got a lot of college kids in here. We've got a lot of young high school kids in here. What do you have in your future as education for our kids? I feel we need to get back to our grassroots, learn history, get our reading, writing, and math, where we all know how to figure our checkbook, kids are graduating, you probably don't see it as a official that you are, the position you're in, but when you get down to earth with all of us, we see a lot of these kids that are graduating with straight A's that can't read and write. Yeah. We need to fix that problem, you people. It is us, not the government.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think we've lost our way in terms of we're no longer trying to educate kids, but trying to indoctrinate kids. And I have a big problem with that. In my home state of Arkansas, we haven't had a major reform on education in over 20 years. I find that unacceptable. We have no longer focused on educating kids and putting them in an ability where they graduate and actually have a skill. We're simply pushing them through the system and forcing them into sometimes four-year programs they have no business being in. Frankly, I think as a country, and certainly in my home state, I'd like to see us focus a lot more on vocational and trade education. We absolutely have to expand that. Every kid does not need to go to a four-year college. There's nothing wrong with going to one. There's also nothing wrong with not going to one. There are a lot of kids who could do really well going to a 6-month apprenticeship program, a 2-year trade program, or a 2-year vocational program. They will finish and have a job making $60,000, $70,000 a year and no debt. Instead of going to a 4-year program they have no business being a part of with a couple $100,000 in debt, making $30,000 a year and never being able to get out from underneath that debt. We have looked at education all wrong, in my opinion, over the last 20 years. We have quit trying to help kids have a career and simply try to help kids get through the system. We are one of the only developed countries in the entire world that does not house our labor and education departments together. We have to take a step back and figure out the best path to put kids on to have skills to go into the workforce. And I think we've done a great disservice to our kids, not only in training them to do something, but also in trying to change how they think and what they think about. I'm a big believer in making sure we get the indoctrination out of our education system and focus on some things that actually give them skills to have a career path. So I live down on earth. I've got 3 kids, and it's real important for me to make sure that they are on the right path. And some days I question whether or not we can get them there.
Thank you for your service. A couple topics that are kind of been flying around lately is changes in 1031, tax laws, capital gains, and step-up and basis, and that affects everybody in this room tremendously if those changes are coming. So 2-part question, what's your thoughts on it? What's your thoughts about it actually changing or happening? And then if so, what can we do to help prevent it?
Again, I mean, I hate to quit, keep sounding like a broken record, but we have to focus on who we're voting for and who's in those leadership positions. The people that we elect in 2022 in the House have the ability to stop that. I'm afraid if they try to push those things through before that happens, I think Donald Trump helped lead the effort on focusing on getting taxes across the board at a lower level, focusing on the American worker. Look, there's no denying that the agriculture community in this country is a target. Whether you're looking at it from an environmental policy or a tax policy, the left is targeting the agriculture community. And I think you have to band together and you have to fight back, and the best way to do that is at the ballot box. In the meantime, I think you have to make sure you're putting pressure on the representatives that are already there, make sure they fight like hell to stop that from happening, because it would be absolutely devastating to a place in a state like this, as well as a state like Arkansas, where I'm from. Right back here. Thank you. You can come with me anytime.
So Sarah, this is Minnie Lou Bradley. She's a true pioneer woman here in the Texas family.
She looks like she's probably the toughest one in this room. No offense to some of you other guys.
She is.
I already know if she tells me to do anything today, the answer is yes, ma'am.
Hi. Well, you've talked a lot about the school system and the education. And I have a lot of opinions about that, but one topic I don't see a lot of coverage, I guess, as much on is you talk about the safety, and its bullying rate of kids has gone down a lot. I mean, school I went to, sure, it was really rude, but no one ever got bullied. But you see a lot of days where the LGBTQ plus, I think, community, queer community, is targeted a lot. There's very high suicide rate, and most of them are high school, middle school, college kids.
No, I think one of the things, probably the worst things that's happened to our country, is social media. And I use social media. I think it can be a great tool. I think it's a great way to reach people and build communities. But I also think it is one of the most dangerous things that's ever happened to our country, particularly when it comes to young people. And I think that our parents need to step up and take a much bigger role in what our kids are engaging in on a daily basis. I think a big part of the rise in bullying is because we have dehumanized people so much. So often, I look on social media and I put a post up and I have just hateful, nasty comments that come in. And I read through and I'll see like, oh, Sarah, you're the most awful, horrific human to ever live. You don't deserve to be a parent. You should not have children. The government should take them away. And then I look at the profile picture next to it, and you would think it would be some angry-looking individual, and yet it's an 80-year-old grandmother surrounded by her 14 grandkids. And you think, what? And I realize in real life, that woman would probably never in a million years walk up and say that to me in person. But we feel totally emboldened and totally free to attack and criticize and tear people down online in a way that we would never do in person. And in that process, particularly with young people, we have dehumanized them. And parents have to take a bigger role in what their kids are engaging on online. They used to always say, don't let your kid have a computer in their room with license to look at everything, because you were inviting every stranger you would never allow them to talk to in public into their bedroom. And yet we are not doing enough to protect kids and make sure they understand what they're doing when they sign on, how permanent it is, how detrimental it can be, not just to their friends and their community, but to their lifetime. Every college, every employer is looking at what they're posting online, and kids are not fully capable of understanding the impact of it. And I think that is not something the government can fix, but it's something that absolutely has to start at home, and we need to do a much better job of protecting kids from it.
You talked about the 38 governors, and if we had 38 Republican governors and 38 state legislatures, would you see as a convention of states as an option to help straighten our country out?
I'd like to think we don't have to go there. I'd like to think that the republic that we have, the existence of who we are as a country that's operated as, again, the greatest country and government and operation the world has ever known, I'd like to see us hold on to who we are. I, for one, hope to be one of those 38 and help lead a coalition of conservative voices on a national platform to push back against some of the craziness and make sure that we get to continue to operate as the United States of America and continue to be as great as we are right now.
Sarah, one more question.
Yes, sir, one more. Be great. Right here. I think it depends on the office, but absolutely, I think term limits. Some people get there too long, too much power, and that's not always a good thing.
How's it going, ma'am? I'm Sam Turner with the RFO program over there. I do have a couple of questions.
Oh, he's got a whole list.
He's
my Jim Acosta. You know, you always say you get one question, they take 6. I'm just kidding with you, Sam.
So how dangerous is this new administration of the ag industry? Is it really as bad as the media makes it out to be? Because I feel like it's directly under attack, And I know the media can dramatize some things, but in your professional opinion, how bad really is it?
I think if we let them do everything that they really want to do, it's very dangerous, not just for the agriculture community, but the really foundation of who we are as a country. I don't mean to be dark but I am a pragmatist. And if you don't believe me, just listen to what they're saying themselves. Anybody who's surprised by the activity coming out of this administration wasn't paying attention for the last couple of years, because they told you exactly what they wanted to do when they got there, and now they're enacting it far faster and far more aggressively, I think, than most of us even expected.
So you do believe that they're going to follow through with what they're saying?
I think they're going to give it their best shot, but people like myself and others, Ronnie Jackson, who was on this screen earlier, are going to do everything we can to make sure they aren't successful.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your
You're
service.
welcome. Thank you so much. Thank you all so much for letting me be here. God bless you.